الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهد الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له ونشهد أن سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله وصلى الله تبارك وتعالى عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم تسليما كثيرا أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. In this week's lesson we are going to look at the second part of the topic I started in last week's lesson with regards to iddah, with regards to the waiting period when a husband either divorces his wife or if a husband was to pass away, then what the wife should do, where she should observe the iddah. So that will be the first part of today's lesson, looking at some rulings with regards to that. And if we have time, we will then start our next section, which will be about at'ima and ashriba, i.e. food and drink, and the importance the Sharia places when it comes to consuming halal, when it comes to earning halal, when it comes to drinking and eating, earning, whatever, anything within our lives, the importance of eating halal and how spiritually it affects us when a person eats haram, when a person is earning haram. So inshallah that will be the second part of today's lesson. Now just a recap of what I discussed in last week's lesson. I mentioned that if a husband gives his wife talaq and divorce, then the wife would have to observe a waiting period. And if she is a woman who is menstruating, then her iddah and waiting period is 3 menstruation cycles. And if a woman is non-menstruating, then when her husband gives the talaq, when her husband gives the divorce, then her iddah and waiting period is 3 months. And with regards to when a wife, she sadly loses her husband passes away, then the Quranic injunction is that this wife or this woman's iddah and waiting period is 4 months and 10 days. Now I'm going to begin today's lesson by looking at, during this waiting period, what the woman is allowed to do and what she is not allowed to do. Now, I mentioned before right at the beginning that there are 2 types of divorce. One is what we call a talaq raj'i, and talaq raj'i is what we call a revocable divorce, where a husband gives his wife 1 talaq, 1 clear words of talaq. Then the rule is that within the wife's waiting period, the husband can take his wife back. Now, when the wife is in her waiting period and her iddah, after her husband has given her a revocable divorce, during this waiting period of 3 menstruation cycle, the fuqaha, the jurists, have actually said that it is recommended for the wife to beautify herself. It's actually recommended that during this waiting period that she beautifies herself. She could wear nice clothing, she could put some nice fragrance on, perfume. Why? So that it tempts the husband to take the wife back. Because remember, as I was explaining before, divorce and separation should be the last thing in a person or a husband's mind. So just say either through mistake, galati se, or through accidentally, or one reason or the other, he gave his wife a talaq, a clear talaq, 1 divorce. So the husband's got this waiting period of 3 months or so where he could take his wife back. So during this 3 months or so, it's actually encouraged upon the wife that she should actually, put some makeup on, try to look nice and pleasing, so that the husband would then revoke the talaq and take her back. Now moving along, if the husband, however, has given her 3 talaqs, and everybody knows 3 talaqs breaks the nikah, breaks the marriage, or if the husband has passed away. Now, during the waiting period of either the iddah of 3 months or 3 menstruation cycles or 4 months and 10 days, it's not permissible for the wife to adorn or beautify herself. Obviously, she can keep clean and pleasant in terms of she can go for a weekly bath or a shower every now and then. She could obviously keep herself neat, presentable and clean. But to apply makeup, lipstick, nice perfume, combing their hair, these kind of things would not be allowed, would not be permissible. Now, I explained in detail last week the reason why it would not be permissible is because she is mourning the loss of the ni'mat and the blessing of nikah. So something really sad has happened to her, either in terms of husband given a talaq, 3 talaqs, her marriage is broken, so she's now lost the blessing and a ni'mat of nikah. So that's why she's in a mourning period where she will abstain from makeup, these kind of things. Or similarly, when her husband has passed away, so it's like a sad moment in her life. So to now mourn the loss of her husband, the Sharia says that she should abstain from fancy clothing, dark clothing, bright colored clothing, makeup, these kind of things. She should abstain herself from these things to show the loss of the ni'mat and the blessing which she had just suffered. So when I explained last week about ni'mats and blessings, those brothers who were here last week will remember the importance of valuing blessings and ni'mats and so on. We touched on this in last week's lesson. Now this then takes me on to the next point here so I mentioned the woman, she's in her mourning period, she can't wear nice fancy clothing, bright colored clothing, which then takes me on to the next point, that a woman who's on an iddah, is she allowed to leave her home to either work, or is she allowed to leave her house to then go and buy some things from the supermarket? Is she allowed to, say, for example, take the children to school? What does the Sharia say with regards to that? Now, if a husband, just say if a woman, her husband has passed away. So, because when a husband passes away, there is no one there to provide for her. Like, technically speaking, it's not obligatory upon anyone to provide for her. Obviously, if she has brothers, they may help her out. If she has a father, he may help her out. But what happened was that when she was married, it was the husband's responsibility to provide for her, financially maintain her. But then what happens, all of a sudden the husband passed away, and now the wife is alone by herself, or she has, say, young children, and it's not obligatory upon anyone to now support her and maintain her. So as you can see that she's actually in a very difficult situation. So it's only in this situation where the Sharia allows that, okay, she will be allowed to go out to work. So during the 4 months and 10 days, she would be allowed to go out during the morning to work. But then as soon as she finishes work, she would then have to return home. And the reason why the Sharia allows her to go out to work in this very situation is because, as I was explaining, there is no one there to provide her. There is no one there to help her. Now just say, Alhamdulillah, there is someone there to provide for her, like her father is willing to look after her during the 4 months and 10 days. Her brother is there, the brother is willing to look after her, willing to support her, is willing to take the children to school, or there is someone else there like the next door neighbor who can take the children to school, or who can do the shopping and so on. Then in that situation, the wife or the woman would then have to stay in her home. She should not leave the home for 4 months and 10 days. But obviously if no one is there, because sometimes there may be a woman, someone, she doesn't have anyone around. In particular, if she had, say, come from Bangladesh, Pakistan, she doesn't have anyone close to her, like her brothers or sisters or father or mother who can help her out, and she's all by herself when her husband passes away, then it may be difficult for her to then get someone to do the shopping or to take the children out to school. Then in that situation, the Sharia allows her to then take the children to school, to then do the shopping, to then, if she needs to work. But as soon as she does what she needs to do, then she would have to then return home straight away. So that's the ruling when it comes to women, when are they allowed to leave the home. are they allowed to leave the place of iddah if the husband passes away. Now in the second situation, when the husband gives his wife talaq and divorce. Now when the husband gives the wife talaq and divorce, during the waiting period, it is the husband's responsibility to financially maintain her. It's the husband's responsibility to financially support her, to financially maintain her. So during the 3 months or the 3 menstruation cycle, the Sharia makes it obligatory on the husband that you need to pay for her bills, you need to pay for the rent or the whatever where she's staying, you need to pay for that, you need to support her, the provisions, the food, you need to do everything. So now in that situation, because the husband is providing for the wife would not be allowed to leave the home, the place of iddah, to go out to work, to go out to drop the kids off, to do this or to do that. Why? Because the Sharia has made it obligatory on the husbands to do it. So just say for example they've got young children and they need to go to school, it's actually the husband's responsibility to actually take the children to school. If he doesn't, just say the husband say, well, I've got this to do, I've got that to do, or I've got work or this and that, then it will be the husband's fault. The husband will be considered liable. Or just say for example the husband is not providing anything for the wife, then in that situation the husband would be considered sinful. So during those 3 menstruation cycle, because the Sharia has made it obligatory on the husband to provide for the wife is not allowed to leave the marital home, is not allowed to leave the place of iddah to go out to work, to earn, to drop the children, to do the shopping, because it's the husband's responsibility. However, just say the other angle is that you may have a situation where the husband is giving his wife talaq and divorce, and he's severed contact with the wife. His ex-wife is totally severed contact with her in terms of, he doesn't care, he's not bothered about the financial side, he's not bothered about the children, he's not bothered whether they go to school or not, he's not bothered about their health. He's basically just done a runner somewhere. Now in that situation, because there is no one there for the wife to look after her, to drop the children off at school, then in that situation it will be permissible for the wife to drop the children off, to go for the shopping, if she really needs to work and there's no one there to support her. Remember, it's the husband's responsibility to do it, but just say the husband is not supporting her, he's basically gone somewhere else, he's gone back to Pakistan, he's gone back to Bangladesh, or he's gone somewhere else and he's just left his wife there. Then in that situation, like in the first scenario, when the husband passes away, it would be allowed for the wife to leave the home, it will be allowed for her to drop the children off. But as I explained before, that this permission is only for that particular thing she is planning to do. So if her intention is to just I'm going to drop this children off at school, but then I'm going to go to the market, or I'm going to go and do some window shopping here and there, and then I'm going to come back home, then that would be wrong of her. Because the Sharia says that you can only go to drop the children off at school. So as soon as she does that, straight away she will need to come back. Or if the purpose of her leaving the home is to do the shopping, so she'll go out to shop and then she should come back straight away. Doesn't mean that she could then go and visit another shop, or she could go to the salon and get a haircut or something like that. These kind of things would not be allowed or permissible. So in a nutshell, what I'm trying to say is that in both situations, it is required for the wife or for the woman during a iddah to remain at home. However, at times of necessity where there is no one there to support her or to provide for her, or there is no one there willing to help her in terms of dropping off the children, doing the shopping, then in these situations, the wife would be allowed to leave the home and do these things, and then as soon as she finishes, then she would have to return home straight away. And this then takes me on to the last masla which I want to mention about this particular topic, regarding a woman in her iddah or in her waiting period. She is not allowed to marry anyone. So for example, another man, just say he finds out that this woman has been divorced. So during her waiting period, he can't go to her and propose to her and say that I want to marry you. That is totally haram, totally impermissible. Because as I explained before, that when a woman is in a waiting period, she is still technically married to the previous husband. It's only when the waiting period finishes, that's when the nikah breaks. But before then, she is still technically speaking the wife of the husband. So the same way, Nauzubillah, it is haram when a woman is, just say she's married to a husband, it's haram for another man to talk to a married woman and to like speak to her and offer her that I want to marry you and so on. The same way, that is haram, that is unlawful, that will constitute the zina of the tongue. So similarly, when a woman is in an iddah and waiting period, you're not allowed to offer her and say to her that I want to marry you or propose to her. But what the Quran does allow, فِيمَا أَرَّدْتُمْ بِهِ مِنْ خِطْبَةِ النِّسَاءِ, is an indirect ishara, an indirect indication that you're willing to marry her after the iddah and the waiting period finishes. So you can do that, you can do a hint, like, and what I mean by hint is that you can't actually use the word marriage. So you could say something like, after you finish your iddah, then I will look after you. These kind of words, that will be permissible, or I will support you. But you can't use the word marriage, because as soon as you use the word marriage, it then becomes clear and sarih. So you could use indirect isharas or indications that, okay, you wait for your waiting period, then I'll look after you, or hint in that particular way that, okay, she doesn't have to worry, because what normally happens, probably not in this day and age or in this country, but obviously in the past, or in particular during the Sahaba's time, the Tabi'in's time, when a woman, when she would lose her husband, either through death or through a talaq or through a divorce, the woman would feel really, really upset. Not because she's lost her husband, well, that's also part of it as well, but also she would think about, oh, after I finish my waiting period, who's going to look after me? Because up to the waiting period, the husband's financing her, the husband's giving her nafqa and maintaining her. But she would worry that, okay, what would happen to me after the waiting period? You know, who's going to marry me? Who's going to look after me? So she gets kind of worried. So therefore, the Sharia has allowed that, okay, to ease her worry, during the iddah, you can, let's say if there's a third person, another groom who's willing to marry her, he can obviously indirectly propose to her, indirectly indicate to her and say that, okay, don't worry, I'll look after you, I'll, maintain you after your waiting period in terms of nikah and marriage. So that would be allowed. But obviously to say anything clear or to make a clear proposal of marriage and nikah, so that would not be allowed during the wife's iddah and during the wife's waiting period. So inshallah, that alhamdulillah concludes the topic about talaq and divorce and about waiting periods. Now moving along to the next topic which I'm going to mention. The next topic which I'm going to start here is with regards to at'ima and ashriba. In Arabic we call it at'ima, which means the topic of food, and ashriba means drink. And this is the beauty of Islam, the beauty of the religion, that Islam is not based on namaz, fasting, zakat. It's not just based on rules about marriage and talaq, but it's a comprehensive way of life. And there are laws and rules telling us about how to eat, the sunnah way, the sunnah method of eating. There are also laws and rules regarding what types of food we can consume and what types of food we can't consume. So inshallah, over the coming weeks, we'll be touching on these points and these things in a bit more detail. Now, as a way of introduction, I just want to, for the remaining part of the lesson, just touch on something which is very, very important, and that is the importance of eating halal food. The importance of earning halal, which we'll probably touch on some other time. But also, in today's lesson, I just want to concentrate a bit more on eating halal. Now, eating halal is one of the most important part of our deen and of our religion. A very famous companion in the name of Sahal bin Abdullah radhiyallahu anhu narrated that there are three things which are part of deen. He mentioned, number one, acting upon the Quran. Number two, following the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And number three is eating halal. So Quran, acting upon the Quran, acting upon the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, And number three, you may be thinking number three should have been, learning about deen or learning about seerah or doing this, doing that. No, the third point he mentioned was eating halal and eating lawful food. Even in the Holy Quran, in Surah Mu'minun, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuha rusulu kulu minat tayyibat wa'amalu salihah. Which means that, O prophets, O messengers, kulu minat tayyibat, eat from the pure and the lawful food, wa'amalu salihah, and do good deeds. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't say, Ya ayyuha rusul, i'amalu salihah, kulu minat tayyibat. He didn't say the other way around. The Mufassirin, when they've commented on this ayah, they've said, Allah has mentioned eating halal first and then doing good actions. So from this we can understand that there are certain a'mals or certain ibadat. Many of our ibadats are dependent on halal, are dependent on halal rizq and on halal food. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned eat halal, wa'amalu salihah, then do good deeds and then do good actions. And I'm just going to mention some examples from hadith where we can see the severity of eating haram and how it impacts on our ibadat and in our worship. There's a very famous hadith, I'm sure many of you have heard or listened or read before, of that person who drinks alcohol. So what does Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam say? That when somebody drinks alcohol or drinks an intoxicant or takes an intoxicant like drugs or anything else, lam yaqbalillahu salatan arba'ina sabahan, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not accept his namaz and salah for 40 days. Arba'ina sabahan. And then the hadith goes on to say that if he does tawbah, then Allah will accept his tawbah up to the fourth time. Then at the fourth time, if he then drinks alcohol, or if he takes haram, or if he drinks some other kind of intoxicant or takes intoxicant, or like injects himself with some kind of drugs, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that lam yatubillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not accept his tawbah and repentance anymore. So this is a hadith of Sunan Tirmizi where it quite clearly says that eating haram, drinking alcohol, or anything which is haram, ibadat and worships are not accepted for 40 days. Then in another hadith of Sahih Muslim, a very famous hadith, that a traveler, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned that a traveler from the past, i.e. from the Banu Israel, he was traveling, his qamis, his clothes was all dirty, his hair was all over the place. Now it's mentioned in another hadith that whenever a musafir or a traveler makes dua, his duas are accepted. Because the traveler is going through so much mushaqqat, so much difficulty. Remember this principle and usul that whenever you go through difficulty, Allah accepts your duas. That's why when somebody goes for Hajj, he's doing a very difficult and arduous journey. He's going from Mina, Arafah, Muzdalifah. That's why duas are accepted. So when you are going through or undertaking some difficulty, or you're going through a difficult journey, duas are accepted. So similarly, this musafir is going through difficulty, and what does he do? He raises his hands and he prays to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He makes dua to Allah. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says in the hadith that this person's dua would not be accepted. Why wouldn't it be accepted? Because وَمَلْبَسُهُ haram. The clothes he is wearing is haram. I.e. the clothes which he is wearing, he bought it through haram money. وَمَطْعَمُهُ haram. The food which he is eating, that is haram. وَمَشْرَبُهُ haram. And the drink which he is drinking, that is also haram as well. So, كَيْفَ يُسْتَجَابُ لَكُمْ? How can Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept his dua? So what we can understand from the two stories I mentioned, or the two hadiths, is that eating haram, consuming haram, drinking haram, impacts on our ibadat in terms of Allah doesn't accept that ibadat and doesn't accept that worship. So that's one nuqsan of eating haram. Another nuqsan of eating haram, another kind of effect of eating haram, is that it blackens our heart. And as everybody knows, that when our heart becomes dark and when it becomes blackened, we then find it difficult to accept the truth. I'll give you a story. There was a group of Christians from Najran. The story is mentioned in the Holy Quran. So they came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they had a few questions about Islam and about Isa alayhi salam. What do you say about Isa? What do you say about the Bible and so on? They had a few questions. Now, Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to them that there are three reasons why the Christians of Najran are not accepting Islam. So there are three reasons why they are not accepting Islam. And one of the reasons why they were not accepting Islam is because وَأَكْلِهِمُ الْخِنْزِيرِ, because they would be consuming pork, khinzir. Now look at this story, or look at this particular tafsir. Because the Christians of Najran were eating pork, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying, in other words, haram, that veiled them from accepting the haqq and the truth. So what we can understand here is that when you're eating haram, when you're consuming haram, or just doing haram in general, a veil then appears on your heart, which then covers your heart. You then find it difficult to believe. You then find it difficult to. That's why we see that those who unfortunately are doing haram, in terms of through actions they're doing haram or they're eating haram, they never find it easy to do any good deeds. They'll always find themselves to be lethargic. You tell them, come on, read Quran. I can't be asked today, or can't do it today, or let's come for namaz. They just like always like fighting their inner nafs and their soul to come to pray namaz. When you tell them, okay, read sunnah, they find it difficult to pray sunnah. They find it difficult to wake up for fajr. They find it difficult to pray namaz. We see this. Whereas someone who eats halal all the time, you make sure that he's very accurate when it comes to consuming food and making sure he's eating halal. We see that he'll have the Quran in front of him. He'll be reading for hours. No problem, no difficulty at all. He doesn't think about home. He doesn't think, this is very difficult. Or when he's reading Taraweeh, when he's reading Salah, there's no difficulty for him. He just like Aram said, reads for hours and hours. So that is the barakah and the natija of eating halal. Whereas the natija or the nuksan or the effect of haram is that you'll always find it difficult to do good deeds, and you'll always find it difficult to do good actions. Now I'll just mention a couple of stories. Some of these stories are, as far as I know, is in Fazail Amal as well, about the Sahabas and how strict and staunch they were when it came to haram. That any food where there was some kind of doubt or they knew that it was haram, they would go to great pains to make sure that they take the haram out. Now the first story is of Hazrat Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, that he had a ghulam, and this ghulam would give Hazrat Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu a daily wage and a daily allowance, which we call in Arabic kharaj. Basically, in those days when there were slaves, these slaves and these ghulams, not only were they doing the household chores for the masters in terms of cleaning, cooking, but they would also go out and earn and work, and whatever they earned and worked, they would give it to the master. So as Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, he had a slave, so he would send this slave out to go and work, and then this slave would then come back in the evening with some food or with some money. Now one day, what did this slave do is that he went out and he did some fortune telling. He was like a soothsayer, like he just went, looked at a person's palm and said, oh yeah, you're going to get married next month, or just made some rubbish up. And he managed to get some money from someone, and he bought some food, and then he brought it to Hazrat Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. Hazrat Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu ate it. Then this Ghulam, the slave, then said to Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu that the food which you have eaten is from the earning of fortune telling. Like I did a bit of fortune telling, I earned some money, bought some food, and I given it to you. So the hadith then goes on to say that Hazrat Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu put his fingers in his mouth and he tried vomiting it out. But because what Hazrat Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu ate was a very small morsel, he couldn't get it out by sticking his fingers. So then somebody suggested to him that drink a lot of water. Drink a lot of water. So drink a lot of water, because when you drink a lot of water, you start bloating. Then stick your fingers down your mouth and then vomit it out, which Hazrat Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu did. That he had drank a lot of water, and then when his body became all bloated, he then stuck his finger down his mouth and he then vomited the contents out. So this is the story of Hazrat Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. Look what pain he went through to make sure that that juice or that part of haram comes out of his body. If it was us, we'd probably say, oh, it doesn't mind, it's quite nice by the way, let's not take it out. But no, Hazrat Abu Bakr made sure that this particular morsel of food doesn't remain in his body, because that's the hadith I mentioned before. For 40 days, namaz, these kind of things are not accepted. So he went through that particular pain to make sure that that particular thing was taken out. And another example of, just very quickly, of Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu, but this story tells us how even doubtful things, which I'll probably touch on next week now, even on doubtful things, Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu would make sure that he didn't eat it, he didn't consume it. And there was an example where, again, one of these shepherds, they brought some milk to him. So Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu drank the milk. Now after he drank the milk, by tasting it, he realized that there was something strange about this milk. Obviously, those who are pious servants of Allah, when they eat, they could derive that there's something wrong here. Either it's from haram, or somebody cooked it, added something haram on, or the means used to get this food was haram. So similarly, as Umar radiallahu anhu, when he drank this milk, he tasted it and he realized there's something wrong here. So he then asked the shepherd that, where did you get this milk from? So the shepherd said that, I got this milk from the camels who people gave as zakat. So basically from zakatable goods, there were some zakatable goods, I zakat camels. So from the camels, from their milk, I got the milk from there and then I gave it to you. Now as Umar radiallahu anhu, because obviously he's not entitled to zakat, because he was not a poor person, so he wasn't entitled to zakat, but he had just eaten something from the zakatable wealth. It's like, say for example, somebody gives zakat money to a rich person can't take it, it's haram. So here Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu had just ate or consumed something from the zakatable wealth. So therefore, again, Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu realized that this is something which is wrong. Again, he stuck his fingers down his mouth and he then vomited that contents out. So from this we can understand how staunch our pious predecessors, the Sahabas, were when it came to making sure that they were eating halal and they weren't consuming anything haram. May Allah give us the tawfiq to act upon what has been said. Inshallah, in next week's lesson we'll elaborate on this topic, and we'll also look at some of the aspects of eating and drinking. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.